Hey team, meet Skimpies, the organic cotton undie made like a liner. Skimpies are for all of us who love going commando but can't quite pull it off like we used to. You just pop Skimpies directly into your pants, press firmly, and it's like you're wearing underwear without the gnarly panty lines. No PFAs, no synthetics, no irritation. Just clean, breathable, organic cotton where you need it most. Created by Bette Bentley, inspired by her own journey as an absolute babe who wanted to live that commando life, but without the UTIs. Go to skimpies.com to get started. Every peach deserves its day, and Skimpies is here to help make it happen. Skimpies, we just want to be in your pants. Hey team, and welcome. I'm your host, Carrie, creator of Mother Life, your destination for all things real talk and parenting. This is the IRL group chat, where we talk about the wild balancing act of pursuing careers and passions while also doing our best to show up for our kids. Join me every week as I sit down with some badass parents in my closet and we talk about their careers, kids, and relationships and all of the weird shit that comes up when you're trying to balance the seemingly impossible. Leadership, the action of leading a group of people or an organization. In my almost 2 decades in the workforce, what leadership looks like in the workplace has changed immensely. We've moved away from this command and control one approach to galvanizing the troops. Instead, we've identified a number of different approaches to motivate, inspire, and strategize for success and growth. Being a leader, whether it's at work, in the home, the PTA, in a pickup game of basketball, it requires a few things, right? A vision and a direction of travel, trust from those that you want to lead, and the perseverance to continue even when it gets hard. To be an excellent leader requires having some superpowers, ones we know women often have with abundance: resilience, adaptability, foresight, empathy. This week's guest had me thinking a lot about leadership and how it applies to my own life, both professionally and personally. My brand of leadership doesn't need to look like my peers to rouse the troops in my home or at work. It needs to work with what I am working with, to inspire confidence and excitement for the path ahead, to be able to respond to the challenges that will inevitably come with a sense of creativity and calm. If that doesn't describe a parent, I don't know what does. If that doesn't describe a mom, I don't know what does. And there's no better person to be inspiring such thoughts because she literally wrote the book, When Women Lead. Julia Boorstin is CNBC's senior media and tech correspondent. In 2013, Boorstin created and launched the CNBC Disruptor 50, an annual list she oversees, highlighting the private companies transforming and disrupting the economy. She also recently launched a podcast inspired by her book, CNBC's Changemakers and Power Players, wherever you get your podcasts. This is such a wonderful conversation, one filled with conviction, but also that reminds us that even the most clear-headed leaders with a direction of travel still every now and then need a nudge in the right direction. Enjoy.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? You literally look like a Disney princess with this.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I look like I had professionals do my hair and makeup.
Well, welcome to the virtual closet, Julia. We do have a lot to talk about. I love that your book is right behind us. When I was looking at your book cover, I was like, it's giving Harvard Business Review. It's giving should be, core reading for anybody who's doing an MBA program. It literally is messaging me. It's telling me that.
Thank you. There was a lot of debate about the cover, and I wanted something not girly, like not pink and purple, and something bold. And that also would be like, I want men to read this. What is a book that's going to be strong and appealing, hopefully, to men as well as women?
Well, I'm excited to get into that because when you and I were first talking about you maybe coming on the pod, and we talked about the experience of you writing this book and thinking about, as you're in a pandemic, as you have young kids, and you're thinking about how you're going to tackle and approach this and what to keep in and what to leave out, there is so much inherent in just the identity clusterfuck morass that is being a career person and a parent, specifically a mom, that I feel like you thought about with great intention. But before we get to that, we have to start with little Julia. I have to say it was a little bit like opening, I'm a Jew, but I love Christmas, opening a Christmas present when I was reading a little bit about your background. Because some people, it's like, how did they end up the way they are today. And I feel like you, at least on paper, have the seeds like sown before you were even born. You have this like prodigy of a grandfather who's this, award-winning historian, Pulitzer-winning historian, right? You've got creative parents, and then you've kind of like forged your own path and deciding how you want to tell stories to the world and how you want to engage with the world. But there's kind of a thread through all of it. Did you realize that growing up, that was part of your thing?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually don't know what's in my Wikipedia page, so I didn't know what you would have seen. But I feel like in a way it does make sense. And when I think about the things that are core to what I do and who I am, it's all about asking questions and really listening and trying to figure out the narrative storyline. And that's something that I feel like I have been raised with from day one. From my grandfather, who wrote all these incredible history books and was really interested in social history and telling narratives. I mean, he wrote this incredible book, The Image, which I loved because it was about America and about how Americans' transitions and pop culture and all of this really told the story of what was going on in the country, more so than what was going on with the politicians and the leaders at the top. And I think there was something really impactful for me about reading that book as a teenager. And actually, I think going back and reading The Image now, it's still like a lot of the things that my grandfather wrote about, with this idea of like people being performative and being a tourist rather than a traveler. And I mean, it's all turned out to be rather true. But that's a whole nother conversation. So what I would say is my parents, who are both writers in different ways, and my mom was a restaurant critic and a travel writer, and my dad is a documentary filmmaker. But my parents actually worked together when I was growing up. They were co-writers on TV shows, including Fame and Falcon Crest, and writing and being a journal and doing journalism and doing documentaries, just asking questions was just everywhere. And my entire family, whether it was my grandfather or my parents, always stressed that you could tell if people were smart if they asked questions. Smart people were curious people. And so being at the dinner table, there was an expectation that not only would I answer questions, but that we would also be asking questions of adults around us. And so I've always been very comfortable asking questions. But also the joke was that my parents could go into an elevator, and by the time they left the elevator on the 10th floor, they would have made friends with the people on the elevator with them and learned something about them and been genuinely curious. And my parents have made friends all over the world, partially because they're doing travel writing and they did documentaries for National Geographic, but it's because they have this curiosity. And I think for me and my family, there's this expectations that you're lucky to meet people, whoever they are. And you should, whether it's your taxi driver in Mumbai or your tour guide in Greece, you have no idea who they are, what their story is, and you can learn something from all of them. So I think that was, so I think that was very much the way I was raised. I also think there was a very high bar and a very high expectation for me to be intellectually curious and not to just go through the motions, but think about what I could contribute intellectually. So it was a very funny, very sort of academic world to be raised in, especially in LA, which is a very Hollywood world. But I feel like it was sort of an academic mini subculture within that.
Well, you could imagine a scenario where it was certainly the case in my house because, I was a journalist before I switched careers. When I told my parents I wanted to be a journalist, my mom was like, you can do anything, achieve your dreams, go for it. But my dad, who's a doctor, like, his soul left his body. Like, he was like dying inside, because while he appreciated the importance of academic rigor, the latest research, whatever, this was like not a career to go into. Like,
well, I didn't think I was going to be a journalist. Like, that's
what was the game plan? What was the game plan?
Well, when I was really little Julia was going to be a ballerina.
Of course.
And apparently my dad said that I told him one day that when I was like 4 years old, that I decided what I was going to be when I grew up, and it was a princess, and that I finally decided that I was going to be a princess when I grew up. So
I told you have princess hair. You have princess hair. I told you.
I have princess hair.
You did it.
So, but when I was really little, like my parents love to tell this story about how when I was the year I was 4, I refused to wear pants or shorts. I would only wear skirts or dresses.
Sure.
And I was into ballet and princesses, and they didn't want me to have Barbies because they were feminists and they wanted to make sure I was a strong woman. And my grandmother gave me a Barbie and it was all over. And I was obsessed with Barbies. And they were like, oh my God, how will she grow up to be a strong, independent woman if she's exposed to all of this girly stuff? And I turned out fine, but they like to joke about that. But I had no idea what I wanted to be. And I do think that the ballet, which I then turned into modern dance, turned into great training for being a public speaker and being on stage and not self-conscious. But I was interested in the law. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be a doctor until I took honors chemistry, and I was the only girl in a class of 19 people. And it was a horrible experience. And I had a hard time memorizing the periodic table. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to be a doctor. But I was really interested in law school and in politics and policy. And I always did journalism. So I was on the newspaper in high school because it was a thing that I liked to do and I knew how to do and I knew I was good at.
And am I right that you went to one of LA's most competitive high schools?
Yeah, I went to Harvard Westlake, which is a big private school here in LA.
Famously intense.
Famously intense. I would say I am also very intense. So who knows how much that is from the school or just the person I was when I came out of the womb. But I just like always did the newspaper. It was my community in high school. I just saw one of my best friends who doesn't live in LA, but we were on that, editors on the newspaper together. And it was a great community for me. And I think and then when I went to college, I was like, oh, I'll do the newspaper because those are my people and I like doing that, but it's not what I'm going to do professionally.
Julia, let's just tell the people we're a Princeton girl. So you didn't just
I went to Princeton, but I was not intending to be a journalist when I graduated.
Right.
I knew I liked to write, but I was like, oh, I'll do the Daily Princetonian because it's a cool, fun thing to do. And I'll hang out with my friends. And I edited the op-ed page and I worked on the arts and leisure section. And it was a thing that I enjoyed, but I was like, I'm going to go to law school, or I thought I was at one point was going to go into politics, and I thought it'd be cool to be a White House intern.
Sure.
So I was a White House intern and I worked on policy.
I did that. I thought it would be cool, so I did that.
So I worked on. I was really interested in like policy, like how do you shape the laws and the way things work, So I worked because my internship was actually for the vice president. I actually got to do cool stuff because there weren't as many interns. So I worked for Vice President Gore, but I was working on education policy and tech policy, and it was so cool. And I feel like I had a lot of opportunities there that I wouldn't have had I been working in the president's office where there were 1 million people. And then I worked in the State Department. I was like, this is going to be I'm going to be in this world of international relations. And the best gig I've ever had is after I was a White House intern, I was an intern for the State Department's delegation to the OECD in Paris.
That is
and it was
a cushy
incredible. Gig. And the fact that I spoke French and I had already gone through all the vetting of the White House thing, this was like the best experience of my life. And living in State Department housing and getting to walk through Paris to work every day and working in a truly international environment. There, I was like, I'm going to do international relations. And I, my senior year, applied to the London School of Economics to get a master's in international relations. And at the same time, I was applying to journalism jobs in New York as I'll do it for a year and then I'll apply to law school, or I'll do this international relations grad school. Because I really thought that the international relations thing was going to be my career. But then I applied to like maybe 10 journalism outlets like Bloomberg and The Economist and all of these different places. And I got a job at Fortune magazine. And I had never taken econ. I have never taken econ. But I was like, oh, you know what? I've just been in school my whole life. Before I go to London, and go to grad school, I should just take a year off and work and be in New York with all my friends. And I was like, business is boring, but I'll try this. And the Fortune job was a better job than like being a fact checker at Entertainment Weekly. So I really had no interest in business. There was a reason I never taken econ. And I was raised by creatives, by documentary filmmakers and writers. And I just didn't understand that I should have taken econ.
Sure.
And instead I was like taking Italian and French literature and a lot of history classes. So I took this job at Fortune magazine and I was like, I'll do it for a year. And I deferred for a year. And then I deferred for another year. And I just fell in love with it. And it comes down to this idea of like storytelling and finding a very data-driven, serious way of telling a story in a world where, at the time especially, like there was the explosion of TMZ and all of this pop culture journalism that was like gossip journalism. And what I was getting to do was real journalism. And the data and the numbers of business made it real and made it tangible. And I did take one really impactful writing class when I was at Princeton with John McPhee, who's this incredible nonfiction writer. And he writes about fishing and these things that you would think would be so boring, but he makes them interesting.
Yeah.
And I just had such great mentors at Fortune. And I also was really nervous about not knowing anything about business. So I totally overcompensated.
Sure.
And I actually think coming in knowing less than my peers and being the youngest person there made me totally go overboard in terms of learning the numbers and figuring out how to read balance sheets and going to older editors and being like, explain to me these SEC documents. And I would read these books at night to try to figure out what was going on in these analyst reports. And I think coming in with such a deficit forced me to overcompensate. And it was the best gift ever because I wasn't afraid to write investing stories that were numbers driven. Whereas my colleagues who had taken statistics and accounting and econ were like, oh, I'm not going to bother. Let me just tell the more narrative stories. But I was like, I'm going to dig into the numbers because this is something I've figured out how to do.
Well, I have to say, I think you really dodged a bullet as somebody who did go to London for that year and did do the masters to be a better journalist in my mind.
I wasn't going to be a journalist. I was going to go to a whole nother path.
Well, no,
I never got to live in London. I wish I had lived in London.
So I stayed for 7 years and got a PhD and accidentally got into international relations and public policy and stayed. It was supposed to be a year. And then I stayed in the field for like over a decade. And now
that could have been me.
But like now I'm coming back to journalism because turns out like, if you have that compulsion and the curiosity and the wanting to talk to people and really get to know their stories, it's actually really hard to do in international relations. And so after a very long time of doing that, I was like, oh, turns out I never filled the cup I initially was trying to fill. So you saved yourself a lot of time, actually, minus like London was a great place to live for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's fair. So then once you're at Fortune, you're falling in love, and then you start at MSNBC, or was it CNBC then?
CNBC.
In 2006-ish?
Well, so there was a kind of funny situation. So I was hired in 2000.
Yeah.
Right before I graduated, before the stock market crashed in 2000. And I was 21 years old, and I was the youngest person they ever hired. And I was like, are you sure that you want to hire me? And the head of reporters said, I don't think you could teach a business person how to write. You can teach a journalist about business. So we're going to give you a shot. But I was really young and had no idea what I was doing, but I threw myself into it. And so they assigned me to work with this editor, this guy, Andy Serwer, who was not another reporter, but he was writing columns and he was doing cover stories. And he was I think his title was editor at large. And they sort of apprenticed me to him. And at the time, he was appearing on CNN every morning or most mornings. And he was just an awesome mentor. I see him every once in a while. And he's always like, Julia, it's time now. You can stop like giving me credit for everything. I was like, no, but I think that when people give you a shot and like believe in you, they just don't even realize how much of a difference
it costs them nothing, but to you it changes your life. Yeah.
And he would be doing interviews with CEOs and he would be like, come in my office and let's do this interview I'm going to do this interview with Larry Ellison, and like you listen and take notes and then we'll talk about it after. And like that's the kind of gift that when I think about people working remotely right now, like to have been given that opportunity, I am so grateful for that. But because he was doing CNN, there was this deal between CNN and Fortune because they were owned by the same parent company at the time. I wrote a story about 10 guys who lost $1 billion or something like 10 guys who lost $1 billion in the stock market crash or something like that. And CNN asked him or me or someone, they were like, can Julia come on and talk about this story? And I was like, no way. I'm like 21 years old. Like I should be on television. And Andy, my mentor, was like, yeah, you have to go do this. Like, go do this. Go do this. And I'd be like, what? I don't know what I'm talking about. He's like, just relax. You wrote this story. You reported the story. You deserve to be there. You're the person they want to have ask these questions. And so he kind of like pushed me to do that. So I talked about that story on TV. And then he really pushed me to start doing it more regularly. And there were a lot of times where he's like, I don't want to go do my slot. Like, I want you to go do this. I don't want to wake up early, or I'm not free to do this one. Go do this one. And so he sort of got me into the mix with CNN. And
how did that feel for you though? Like, were you, I mean, I know you had the training, you were used to being on a stage and, you know, in front of people.
I had the training as a dancer.
Yes, but this is like a totally different thing. Was it exhilarating or was it terrifying? What were you feeling?
I thought it was just like hilarious. Which I guess is why I didn't look nervous. I felt like it was like back to being at the dinner table with my grandparents and their intimidating friends, which occasionally was a Supreme Court justice or a senator or whatever. And I'm the eldest child and the eldest grandchild. So I always was like the little person at a table with adults. And I was like, oh, like these skills I have of being quick on my feet and knowing how to respond with an intelligent answer, these are skills that are really valuable on television.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really fun. And it's a different kind of energy than writing. You know, writing and reporting, you know, there was just a much more solitary experience. Yeah. And this was a totally different skill set and a totally different part of my brain. So I thought it was fun. And I sort of assumed that, you know, especially once I made a deal to go on CNN headline news 3 times a week, that this would be my job. I would do CNN 3 times a week, and I would continue writing at Fortune, and I love my job, and like, why would anything ever change? And then in 2006, CNBC was like, would you be interested in making this a full-time thing at CNBC? And I was like, like I've never written a script for television. I'd only just been asked questions. So the 5 years I was doing CNN, I would either give them questions or they'd come up with questions. Then I'd talk about the news of the day or my story or whatever was going on in the stock market. But I'd never like actually written a script or read a teleprompter. But I was like, oh, I'll do it for a year and see how it goes. And then I'll go back to Fortune. So, but quickly I realized the magazine industry was collapsing. There were like more rounds. I had survived various rounds of layoffs. There were more rounds of layoffs after I started at CNBC. And I was like, what am I going back to? And I'm actually enjoying this TV thing. But there was a very steep learning curve to like figure out how to read a teleprompter. They had to, I mean, the first day I was there, I was like learning how to use my computer and all the TV software. And they were like, oh, there's news. Like, can you go stand in front of the Apple store on Fifth Avenue? And I was like, huh? And they like sent a producer out to teach me how to do that. And that was my first day at work. And that was slightly terrifying. But the nice thing about daily TV is like you're doing it every day. So you're going to screw up one day and then you're going to do it the next day.
You're going to get a lot of reps in.
Yeah, you get a lot of reps in. So, and I've been doing it for a really long time.
Julia, I don't think I could be less surprised that you are the eldest daughter in your family. So
I have serious eldest daughter syndrome. Eldest daughter, eldest granddaughter.
Beyond.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of birth order chat on the pod of like, what order are you? And I love that you did it for me. Very oldest sibling of you, very oldest daughter of you. How many siblings do you have?
I have a younger brother. He's a little bit more than 5 years younger than I am. But as a result, we were 6 years apart in school.
Okay.
So when I was graduating from 12th grade, he was graduating from 6th grade. So we were in different universes.
So you were a little bit only child energy for a while too.
I was a little bit only child. And I think he also, as a result, has a little bit of only child too, because we were so far apart. And now we're really close, but we were like never in the same universe when I was, a kid living at home.
And so what do you think of the eldest daughter stereotypes? What do you think you most subscribe to?
Well, I feel like I should ask you to remind me what all of the stereotypes are.
I mean, but I can guess your relationship with a spreadsheet is pretty intimate.
It's more a calendar. I'm really into Google Calendar. My husband's also an eldest child, and he's, I think, almost the eldest grandchild in his family, but like really organized Google calendaring, so things don't fall through the cracks. I'm very interested in making sure things don't fall through the cracks. And a woman I interviewed once, actually the CEO of Clear, talked about like having a belts and suspenders attitude and how she was raised of like, make sure you have belts and suspenders. So if one thing fails, you're going to be prepared. And I feel like I'm prepared for a lot of scenarios. And my eldest son, who's 14, wrote an essay for school in 8th grade about the fires, and because we had to evacuate from our house in the fires. And during the evacuation, so that morning, there were fires we live in Hollywood, but there were fires in the Palisades, and I was stuck in Las Vegas for work. And I kept on saying to my husband, well, for me, I would probably pack some bags right now. Like, I'm an over-preparer. Like, there's Neosporin and Band-Aids in every bag I've ever carried.
Sure.
Like, I've got Purell, I got the Kleenex. Like, I am prepared for any situation. And that morning I was like, do you think you should pack some suitcases just in case, like get organized, like make sure you know where all the important stuff is? And my husband was like, I think it's going to be okay. He's very chill. I'm not very chill. And my son wrote this essay where he talked about how I'm either overly anxious or, depending on the situation, sometimes adequately prepared.
I was just going to ask you if you are an anxious person, because that's one of the stereotypes of eldest, especially eldest daughter, is anxious.
I actually think I've gotten less anxious over time, and I am less anxious since I wrote my book, and I'm less anxious since having kids, because I feel like you kind of have to like
go with God.
Let go. Yeah. But the fact that he wrote this essay that talked about how I'm the one who would have made sure they were prepared to evacuate, and I wasn't there, and that's the role I play in the family. I was like, wow, that is aware. Yeah. And then they did have to evacuate, and in 5 minutes they had to throw clothes, cats, everything in their car and get out of there. But the fact that my son was like, sometimes she's, seems like she's overreacting, and sometimes it seems like it's the right amount of preparedness. I was like, well, I landed and met up with them, and it was fine, and our house did not burn down, thank God. But I was like, it was just fascinating to read this in his essay and be like, wow, he understands the family dynamic.
Well, I was going to say, like, what a wild thing for him to be seen by him, and like for him to be able to observe this about, because he's just at an age, like, I don't know if I was making observations like that when I was his age. That's very astute.
Well, it was a pretty good test case of who's going to have suitcases packed ahead of time. But then when we got home from our evacuation, now we have suitcases packed for a fire evacuation that are sitting in our basement in case we have to.
We have a system. Now we have a plan.
Now we have a system. We have a plan.
So in the midst of all this, you mentioned your husband. When does he enter the picture? How old are you?
So we met when I was 25 and was living in New York, and he was living in LA. And we met through a mutual friend at Sundance Film Festival.
Aww.
And I went there sort of looking for stories, kind of wanting to get out of town. One of my friends and I went, and we met through a mutual friend at Sundance. And there was an instant connection, and I went back to New York and he went back to LA, but we just started talking, and we talked every day for 2 weeks. And then I was going to come out to LA for my dad's birthday. And we just sort of fell in love on the phone. And then he picked me up at the airport. He took me to my parents' house. And my mom likes telling the story about how when, he dropped me off at my parents' house, and he sort of walked around the house and like met the cat and looked at the photos. And she said, as he was sort of taking it all in, she was like, he's going to marry our daughter.
Wow.
And by the way, she might have said this with previous boyfriends, who knows? But in this case,
we'll give it to her. Let's give it to her.
Yeah, we'll give it to her.
Okay, Mom.
So we were long distance, and we dated long distance for about 3 years. But my husband works in the film industry, so he would come to New York and work on movies and live with me for 3 months, and then he would go back. So we were together that whole time, in a relationship that whole time, but there was a good amount of back and forth.
So we did the exact same thing. 3 years, London to LA. My husband's in film. I was doing the international relations thing. And I actually think that was some of my favorite time with him, because when we were together, like, we really had to pay attention to each other. And when we were apart, we really had to pay attention to each other in a way that when you're just cohabitating, it's
totally different. I'm amazed you go. So London is a huge time difference.
Huge.
LA, New York is only 3-hour time difference. So we could really be on the phone a lot.
No, it was perfect, because he was not bothering me when I was in the office. Oh. You know what I mean? Like, it was like we would talk. I would talk to him on my way to work. I was walking to the office. I would talk to him on the phone, and then I would say goodnight. I would work my day. I would go out maybe to dinner with friends, and then I would say good morning as I was going to
Yeah.
bed.
Well, when we were long distance, someone gave us the advice that you have to have there are two key rules. One is whenever you say goodbye, you need to know the next time you're going to see each other.
Yes.
And also they said it's valuable if you could not be apart for more than 2 weeks.
Yes. Oh, we got a month. Maybe that's because people knew it was so far.
Yeah. Yeah. But my husband's father is an economist. And so he had he is talking about a spreadsheet. He had all these like strategies with frequent flyer miles so we could do these short weekends.
God bless him.
The whole thing. But I do think that you really get to know someone's value system. And because you're having these long conversations that can be more philosophical because you're not in the sort of muck of day-to-day life, and you can talk about these really big picture things. And so to the point of parenthood, like we knew we both wanted to have kids.
I was going to ask you, yeah.
Yeah, my husband's one of 3. I'm one of 2. Like there was just never a question about that kind of stuff. And then he was going to quit his job and move to New York. At the time, there was a film industry in New York. There's much less of one now.
Yeah.
But CNBC, so I had switched to CNBC and I was a general assignment reporter. And then they asked me, they were like, would you rather cover retail in New York or media in LA? And I was like,
I'm suddenly extremely interested in media.
Yeah. And you know, I'd done a couple big stories on media, and I would say those are probably the 2 categories I was doing the most on. But I was like, you know, let me try this again. I'm going to try it for a year. And I've been in LA for like 17 years. It's been a really long time. So, so I moved out here in 2006. We got engaged soon thereafter, and then married in 2007. So,
and you knew you wanted to have kids. Did you have any thoughts about like how you were going to negotiate this with your career? What sort of considerations were there? Because then now you are on camera, and that's a whole thing. And maternity leave in journalism is pretty thankless. So what was going through your head? What was the plan?
So I knew I wanted to have kids. I knew I didn't want to wait too long. And I didn't really know. One thing that has been, and back then was a huge advantage in my life, is that I work East Coast hours in LA. So I start my day on a conference call every day at 5:15. I got professional hair and makeup, so I don't have to. It's not like I have to wake up an hour before that. Maybe I wake up half an hour before that. But then I'm done at 3, and we go off air at 3. And so I knew that, you know, my husband didn't start his day until 9. I knew that meant that the hours where we would have to be away from our kids were much less than if I were in New York. I would be on Squawk Box really early in the morning and then on, and, you know, so I just knew that the day would be longer in New York because it wasn't about the early morning hours. So I sort of felt like that would help me navigate it. I was anxious about it. And I remember I was interviewing this woman. Again, when you get these advice or help from people and they don't even realize the impact they had, Dawn Ostroff, who at the time I think was at the CW, and she had basically created and grew the CW, an incredible media executive. I was having a meeting with her, and when she heard I was pregnant, or I guess I'd interviewed her a couple times. When she heard I was pregnant, she reached out. She said, let's have tea at one of these places in Beverly Hills. And I met up with her, and she said, I want to ask you like how you're doing, and I want to tell you that you're going to be able to do this. And it kind of felt like it was out of nowhere. And we were talking about work stuff too, but she's like, she has 4 children.
Oh my God.
Blended family. Okay. But she's like, you can do this. Like, I just want to let you know you can do this and you're going to be great. And she gave me a little speech and talked me through it. And the fact that she had the generosity to reach out to me about that and to like start this conversation was incredible. And I have since heard from other women that she's done the same for other women. So she is clearly one of these, you know, incredibly magnanimous people who understands that there is such value when you reach out to people and tell them that kind of thing. And I just like, I remember that conversation where I was sitting in that tea room. I think maybe it was at the Peninsula or something fancy, and her being like, you can do this. You're going to be able to do this. And don't let people tell you you're not. And so there were just a couple of women like that who were like, we're going to help you through this. And also I live in LA and my parents are here. And And they have been incredibly helpful.
I was going to say, just because they're here doesn't mean they're helpful, but it sounds like
incredibly helpful. And also I saw my mom was a working mom.
Right.
And my parents, by the way, I saw them as partners. When I was really little, I thought everyone's parents worked together. I would go visit them in their little office on the Warner Brothers lot. And I thought everyone's parents shared an office.
So cute.
That's just what I thought happened. And then I was like, oh, not everyone's parents work together. But I think I knew I would have the support of my family. And it was just something I wanted to do. And I think there were just enough women I was seeing, saying like, I'm just going to have a baby now. Now it's time. And I also knew a lot of women who had struggled with infertility. So I felt this anxiety to not wait too long.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that we had no problems with infertility. I got pregnant right away. And so I sort of built in this buffer where I was like, who knows, maybe it'll take years to get
famously,
pregnant.
it's the ones who plan that have no problem.
Yeah. So I just felt like I felt very lucky to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy. And I really loved being pregnant.
Okay, cool. What did you love about it?
I just thought it was so cool that I was growing a baby inside my body. It was incredible. And I did feel terrible at parts, but I didn't have horrible morning sickness. And I just thought it was really cool. I loved feeling the baby kick. It felt incredible. And I felt so connected to my body. And I feel like having been a dancer, there's this whole thing about doing ballet where you're trained to just like ignore what your body is telling you and control it.
Right.
And then when you do modern dance, it's all about like listening to your body and sort of working with your sort of what your body wants to do. But then when you have when you're pregnant, you're just like living with this growth. And I just felt so good. And just, I found it fascinating, like such this weird experiment.
Nothing could be, from what we've heard of you, more you than this statement. Like, I just loved walking around being a science experiment. This was really cool. There were so many observations to make. I'll tell you what I loved. Okay, when I was pregnant the second time, the first time was a pandemic. No one saw me pregnant. I was like, I came into the pandemic not with a baby and not looking pregnant, and I came out with a baby and not looking pregnant. The second one, I was like, I wear generally kind of like baggier stuff. That's sort of my vibe. I'm going to wear the most skin tight shit you've ever seen. I'm going to walk around with a baby bump and all of this like bodycon stuff because it's the only time in my life where I'm going to like want to have something really tight around my waist. So that part was fun, but everything else I will leave.
But I also think that I'm telling you that I love being pregnant after having had 2 pregnancies and having come into that confidence of being pregnant. And when I was first pregnant, I didn't tell anyone at work. I'm in LA. They're shooting me from the waist up. You can't tell. And then I went back east, and I think I was like 17 or 18 weeks pregnant. I went to my boss's office, and I had to tell him, and I was so nervous. And I'd really kept it secret. And, wearing big blazers and stuff like that. And I would say like there was like this whole transition where my then boss, who's not at CNBC anymore, was like, you're not really pregnant. Like, you don't look pregnant. You're not really pregnant. I was like, yeah, I'm pregnant. He's like, but you don't look pregnant.
It's pretty binary, buddy.
Yeah.
It's a real 0 or 1 situation.
No, it's very real. I'm feeling it now. And so that kind of forced me to be like, yeah, I am pregnant.
Right.
And then the fact that I was visibly pregnant on TV made me sort of get confidence in that experience. And because there were all sorts of awkward things of like, I remember I interviewed 50 Cent at CES and because he was doing some tech stuff and he like tried to touch my belly and I was like, whoa. And so there are all those weird, awkward moments, or CEOs would like comment on my belly or my breast and I'd be like, okay. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to own this. I'm on TV and I'm pregnant. There's no hiding it. And like, who cares? There was just this element of like, this is it. This is happening. I'm not going to hide it. I did remember there were some guys I was friends with. There was a guy who I'd known for a really long time who I'd been friends with in college. I thought he sort of understood me and my ambitions. And I remember him saying to me, well, you're not going to still work after you have a baby, are you? And I'm like, wait, do you remember who I am and my passion and love for my job? Like, why are you even saying this?
That is true, though. People go completely it's like they've never met you before all of a sudden when this happens. And I told this story recently, but like one of the most profound arguments I ever got into with my mom, who's like working mom my whole life, was like, well, maybe you'll start working part-time and da 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 da. And I was just like, what? Like, am I supposed to become a different person overnight? Like, what is everyone
Yeah,
talking
but
about?
also like I didn't know how I was going to feel.
Yes.
And there were a lot of people who were like, you're such a hard driving, serious person. Maybe you're not going to like being a mom. And I was
Yes.
like, wait a second, you have no idea what I'm going to like.
Yes.
And I don't know what I'm going to like.
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to feel.
Yes.
And so, and again, like the pregnancy thing was so weird. And to me, I thought it was so cool.
Your science
and then
experiment.
but also I was breastfeeding. I was like, this is incredible that my body is growing this baby. And I loved breastfeeding. And because I went back to work after about 3 months and I was like, I'm going to keep breastfeeding. And this is before the era where there were Bobby and all of these organic formulas. And I was like, I can do this. I enjoy breastfeeding and having that connection time, and I'm not going to stop. So I became like nuts about bringing my Medela breast pump with me everywhere I went. And there were a bunch of times I went to New York and I would bring my baby with me both times after my kids were born. And sometimes I'd bring my parents, sometimes I'd bring my husband, but I was like, I'm not gonna be away from my kid when he's however many months old. And so I would do now these things that seem insane. Like I remember going to the, again, Consumer Electronics Show and like pumping in the bathroom on the floor of this convention center because I wasn't gonna not pump. And so in retrospect, I think I did a lot of things that were crazy, but I felt like I was doing them because I felt bad about traveling and I didn't want to be gone. And so this was my way of maintaining connection, you know?
I felt weirdly observed by people because I had been this like very career obsessed. I loved my job. I loved everything I was doing. And I felt like people were observing me to see like, would my maternal instincts kick in? How would I behave? And especially with my first one, like I almost felt embarrassed about like the love and mush I wanted to give him because people were like almost, I felt like they were like, haha, I told you were gonna be like that. Like it was like this weird thing where I was just like, can everyone just leave me? Two things can be true. I can be obsessed.
Two things can be true
with my job and obsessed with my kids. It's okay.
And I felt that's exactly how I felt. Like there's no reason that the fact that I love my job means that I wouldn't be a totally devoted, obsessive, in love with my kid's mother.
Yeah.
And so I think before I had kids, I was very locked down about my personal life. I was very young when I started at Fortune when I was 21. So I was always the youngest one. And I was very focused on being taken seriously. I wanted to be taken seriously. And so talking about my boyfriends or even my fiance was not going to help me be taken seriously. So I just like didn't talk about my personal life very much and sort of kept that very private and wanted just to talk about work. And then when I was pregnant, I was like, fuck it. Like this is who I am. And I am going to talk about it. And I also felt this like hyper focus. I think I was more efficient in the year after I came back from having my first kid than any other time in my life because I was like, if I'm going to be away from my kid,
it better be worth it.
It better be worth it. And so I'd never done a documentary before. I pitched a documentary on the future of TV. I was like, let's do this. I pitched the Disruptor 50 list, which I've been doing for 13 years. And I always know because based on how old my kid is, because I was like, if I'm gonna work and I'm gonna have childcare and have a nanny home with my kids between the hours of 9 and 3, I'm gonna make the most of every minute. So I don't know. I miss having babies. I miss that little kid time.
I've got a psycho 2-year-old you can come look at. The 5-year-old's like he's basically a kid now, but the 2-year-old like she's still
2 is tough.
You can go and spend some time with her, Julia.
Once they are 5 and can negotiate and reason, it gets so much easier.
I don't know.
Being able to incentivize.
Yes.
It's like not a bribe, it's an incentive.
Yeah.
Being able to incentivize our 5-year-old. I was like, wow, we're in new territory here.
Except like mine has gamed the system. Like he's figured out how valuable the incentive is to him. It's all game theory, really, when it comes down to it. So going back to you being productive and hyper productive since having kids, like you've also been prolific because you've like started all these things. You just launched a podcast. You've written this book that's like now becoming this book that everybody wants to read who is interested in how you grow a successful business. How are you doing all of that?
Well, it's been a long time. My kids are 14 and 11 now. I do feel like in the first 5 years or so, it was just intense triage. And I actually think from a parenting standpoint, the fact that I was like, I'm going to front load my day. I'm going to be at work 5:30 at the latest. I'll be done at 3. That made me and my husband be much more real partners in terms of the baby stuff than a lot of my friends had the opportunity to do, because my husband was in charge until our nanny showed up. And that meant when the kids were older, he was making eggs, and yes, there were shells in them. And when the babies, they were babies, he was like dealing with the breast milk and the bottles and the diapers, and there was no safety net for him until the nanny showed up. And so I have a lot of friends who sort of co-parented with their husbands, and there was not and could correct them and help them. And there was less of a, well, I'm not there to help, so he's got to figure it out. And as a result, I think we really are partners. And I think a lot of that was forged in those early years of even now some days I work from home, but most mornings, it's up to my husband to feed them and get them to school and make sure if it's raining, they have a raincoat or not. But that's not something that I can micromanage. And I think not being able, again, eldest daughter.
I was about to say.
I don't have the opportunity. I can't micromanage that stuff.
Wow. What a gift for you, actually.
But it's a great gift. It's just a gift. There was no opportunity to micromanage, which I think created a good pattern of that's just not something that I have a chance to do. And I also think having such an intense job means I'm not a helicopter parent. I have no chance to be a helicopter parent because there's just no time for it. So I think it's it has worked to my advantage to have this intense job that I love. And also when I'm with my kids, want to be really focused on them.
Now, obviously your big beat that you've been covering for some time now is tech, right? What is your relationship with tech in your sort of off-duty life, and how do you think about it for your kids?
So, I am trying to stay. So I would say this is a complicated answer, right? The good news for CNBC is we go off air at 3 p.m. Pacific. So I can put my phone down. I do have an Apple Watch, which I think has really enabled me to not be tied to my phone. I often lose my phone in our house because I'm I put it down somewhere and then I'm walking around with my Apple Watch. When I'm around the kid, there are no phones at the table at dinner. When they were little and I would be doing Legos with them or puzzles or, whatever our playtime was, I wouldn't have the phone around, but I would have the Apple Watch once I got one. That was if I got a phone call or a text or something, so I wouldn't feel totally disconnected. But my kids accuse me of being photo obsessed and taking too many pictures of them. I'm oh, but you're so cute. How can I not take pictures?
Yeah.
I do try to put my phone away. My husband is really good at putting his phone away an hour before bed, and he plugs his phone in by his desk downstairs. I do not do that. The phone is by my head and it sleeps right next to me. And when I wake up in the morning and my alarm goes off at 4:45, the first thing I do not meditate. I do not look out the window.
Yes, Julia, tell us.
I meditate at night. I do not meditate in the morning, because then in the morning I'm pick up the phone.
You gotta go.
And I read in, and then I jump into the bathroom and brush my teeth, and I'm out the door. And I try not to wake up my husband. So my mornings are I just hit the ground running, and my phone being right next to my bed is a big part of that. There have been probably 4 or 5 times in the past 15 years where I've gotten a phone call in the middle of the night that something was breaking news and I needed to jump in front of the camera. It has not happened recently, but it is something that I will not forget because it was so dramatic when it happened. So I would say that's one reason the phone is by my bed. But I also wear an Oura ring.
I just got one this week.
Oh my God, I really like it. So my big struggle is getting enough sleep. And I'm such a happier, more sane, less anxious person when I've gotten enough sleep. And it's very easy with my work to go out to a work event or have my 14-year-old want me to talk to him until 10 o'clock at night or 10:30 at night. And the next thing you know, I'm exhausted. So the Oura Ring really keeps me honest. So I would say my favorite tech devices are my watch and my ring.
I love it. It's basically things that keep you healthy and keep you away from your phone.
Yeah.
Using tech to fight tech.
Using tech to fight tech. Yeah. And we're pretty strict with our kids in terms of restrictions. We do let them play video games, but only on the weekends and only if they're playing together. And all of this data about kids is like, if they're playing together, it's like a social thing. You don't want them like alone in a room staring into the void of all weird strangers on the internet. But having two boys who like to play together is a big gift. And then no social media, but my older one does have an iPhone, which we monitor with all sorts of annoying restrictions on him and his ability to, do anything fun. There's no browser on his iPhone, so he can't actually access the internet, which is very annoying to him.
I bet, but also...
But he can text.
Is this like in the discussion, like I'm assuming there are like parent group chats and things, like have there been like covenants made, blood oaths sworn to say like we all have to kind of be on the same page?
We did that. There's a thing called Wait Until 8th. We signed it, and it was no smartphone until 8th grade. And so last year we got him a dumb phone, which was, first we got him a Google Pixel, which my husband, who's the tech support in our family, removed all apps from, and it didn't really work. Once you like really dumbed it down, it didn't work well. And then we had been on the wait list for this thing called a light phone, which is actually a dumb phone. It has nothing on it except for text, email, or maybe it doesn't even have email, but basically there's no access to the internet, no apps. And by the time it had shown up, we had already like gotten convinced by kids on the bus and this and that he would have an iPhone with its severe restrictions on it, including no Safari or Chrome. But my husband used the light phone for about 6 months until we decided it just wasn't functional enough for us to maintain our partnership and me to be able to reach him when I needed to.
Yeah, it's
so
tough.
I like the concept of a light phone, but it's really hard on I could never have a light phone. I like the idea of him having a light phone for his sanity, but my husband doesn't do social media. He's very good at being restrained about these things.
That's my husband too, and obviously not me. Now let's talk about the book, because what's interesting is you've written this book about women who lead and also made a conscious choice to say, I'm really centering this on their careers. And while many of them might be moms, that's not the story here for me, right?
Totally. 100%. I felt like there were plenty of other women who were going to write about the motherhood journey, or women like you were going to talk about the motherhood journey. And I just thought there wasn't anything out there that talked just about the success of female leaders and how they did it and why they were successful and why we should study their leadership traits. And there are incredible books about business leaders, like Good to Great by Jim Collins. That's an amazing book. None of those leaders in there are women. And so I love those books, but like there was something missing. And so again, back to me being a 21-year-old at Fortune magazine and wanting to be taken seriously, I was like, I want this book to be taken seriously. And I want these women to be taken seriously. And maybe it's because I have two sons. Maybe it's because I'm a reporter on CNBC where our audience, I think, is more male than female. But I was like, I want men to be able to access this too. And I want this to be accessible to the male reader. I want guys in business school to think, hey, I want to read about these female leaders. They have defied the odds. I want to defy the odds. What can I learn from them? So there's no pink on the cover. And I talk about things like pregnancy or breastfeeding when it's relevant to the story, but it's really not centered on that. And that was definitely a choice.
But I also think, as we have discussed earlier, like, I would be interested to hear the women that you covered, I feel like they would appreciate that, is I guess what I'm trying to say, is being constantly qualified as like the woman who did this, the mom who did this, whatever. Part of the reason of starting this podcast is like, we're all just fucking people. And I interview dads too, because like, it's like, your career journey is informed by the compromises you make when you have a kid, but like, it is not your entire identity. Right?
Yeah. And I would say one reason I wrote the book is because I had decided to stay in LA instead of pursue opportunities in New York. And that meant having this job where I was working until 3, and that gave me an opportunity. It also meant I was really hungry for growth and really hungry for something new and different. And this book was that. I could have kept doing the same thing on TV year after year, but I was at an age once I hit 40, I was like, what can I do that's more and that's going to really challenge me? And when I realized that this was my project, of sort of like you find your thing, you're like, oh my God, this is the book I have to write. Um, it made sense for me to pursue this. And I did write it during the pandemic. I don't know if I would have been able to do it without the pandemic, because I was broadcasting from home. There was no driving around. There was no travel. There were no social events. There were no soccer games. And all of a sudden I had time in the afternoons and then in the evenings after my kids went to bed that time didn't exist for me before. And I also became obsessed with this project and knew I had to do it. I hilariously thought there would be a very limited window where I could get work done on it, because I was like, oh, the pandemic will be over in a couple months.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I do think I was kind of put pressure on myself to really move fast, because I was like, the pandemic's gonna be over. We're gonna be out socializing. And so that pushed me to move quickly through it. And then I was working at home with my husband, and he understood how important this was to me. And he would take the kids when I needed to work on a Saturday morning. And then again, with the help of my parents, they took the kids overnight almost every Saturday night once we had gotten through the worst of those early days of the pandemic and we felt like it was safe. And that was a huge gift for my parents.
Huge.
To have that socializing. It was great for my kids. I had no guilt about not being around. And then I would do these like intense, writing sessions where I would like drop them off my parents at 2 on a Saturday. And then I would basically work only with interruption for dinner on Saturday night. And I knew that that was like special, unusual time. So I could be super productive.
Whew. I mean, some people would have taken a nap, maybe gone out on
took
a
some
date,
naps.
but
you couldn't go out.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There was nowhere to go. There was
a candlelit dinner on the floor. No,
yeah, but there was some of that too. But I was at home with my husband, so I could I sucked him into this project. If I was like, you're smart, you can help me work through this thing. And we would like sit outside and, in our backyard, and I would be like, okay, we got to talk about chapter 3. I need your advice on this. And that would be like our Saturday night date.
So you did get you got to be the parents that worked together on something, just like yours.
We did work together. It was really hard. I don't think he realized that I was sucking him into this project as much as I did. But, being trapped in our house and knowing I had this smart person who would give me different perspective. And also he works in the movie industry. He understands the importance of highlighting the character's change or the drama, whatever it is. He had great instincts. And I sort of, it was maybe inevitable, but I wish I had been more careful about sort of the expectation. I mean, I took so much of his time on this.
You guys are still married. It's fine.
It worked out. Yeah, we worked through it.
Now you've read all of these great books about leadership and business that have come before, and then you've written this book, When Women Lead. The suggestion being that when women lead, something different is happening or going on. What are like some of your big takeaways from this book that you were just like, when you're getting into the data, you're getting into the stories, you're just like, oh my God, how have I not seen this or realized this before?
I think it was in the same way that becoming a mother was very liberating for me and made me feel more confident in myself and more open at work about who I am as a person. This book was a real turning point for me, I think, just as a human, and feeling like less constrained or afraid of what people are going to think or worried about doing the right thing, and less of that first eldest daughter syndrome, and more just realizing the importance of authenticity. And the women who succeeded did not all fit a certain type. They didn't all do the same thing. They did hard things. They sat in discomfort. They, and they really understood who they were and what they were good at and what they weren't good at. I'm going to shout out to an amazing writer and friend of mine who gave me advice when I was working on the book, named Eve Rodsky, who wrote a great book.
Eve Rodsky, Fair Play.
Fair Play, amazing book. And I was like, can you give me some advice in the book? And I was talking to her about it. And she's like, what about your story? And your story is a leader. And I was like, I'm not a leader. And she's like, yes, you're a leader. And she's like, you need to write about your experience as a woman in business. And I wrote the first chapter with that in mind. And I shared things. I was so shy about sharing things about my personal, and I share things in the introduction to my book because she was like, your story matters too. And I really had never thought of myself as a leader until really the end of this book writing process and the conclusion of the book. And I was like, we're all leaders, whether we're leaders of the PTA or in our family. I'm a leader in my family. I'm a leader when I organize activities for a group of friends. And that's something to be proud of. And I think I'm just a lot more comfortable in who I am, knowing that we all have our own strengths and we don't need to fit ourselves into a box. And I think about the women who have succeeded in such dramatically different ways. I don't know. So I just think it's really about authenticity and realizing that, I don't know, that this is, I accomplished a great thing. I'm really proud of this book I wrote. And so I don't need to second guess myself or doubt myself or have imposter syndrome because I earned it. And I wish I had felt that confidence earlier in life. I've heard so much about risk taking, and I know that I'm inherently risk averse. And I wish I had really seen that data about risk taking earlier in life.
So when your own kids go to take some pretty big swings, crazy risks, and you are matching that with your own eldest daughter energy, are you going to be totally chill?
I think I will be more chill than I was in my life thinking about risk taking. And I also think that they're boys and maybe they don't have that same eldest daughter energy.
No, they won't. That's why I'm like, are you going to be able to? I'm sure they're just going to swing for stuff because it is a different thing.
I hope they do. And I hope that eldest daughters in this next generation at least can see the data about the risk aversion that might be holding them back. And I don't know. I mean, that was a terrible answer to your question about what I learned writing the book.
No, you didn't.
What was the question?
I think you answered it very succinctly. Just like, what were the big takeaways for you from the experience of writing the book? I think you absolutely answered the question. Julia, this has been so fascinating, so interesting. The podcast, people, it's now live. It's been going for a couple of months now, right?
Yes. So the most exciting thing about the book is that it spawned this amazing franchise at CNBC. And what I realized is that the book is a picture in a moment in time, right? The stories are everything that happened basically before mid 2022. So it's all relevant. The data and research in it is very much relevant, but there are these stories that are still happening. And I didn't want it just to be this frozen moment in time. So I pitched to my bosses at CNBC, turning it into a franchise, and they enthusiastically agreed. And I'm so grateful that my male bosses understand the value of telling these stories and also building this community. So 2 years ago, we launched this list, and I had the support and advice and mentorship of amazing women. Desiree Gruber, who runs a company called Full Picture. We were going on a walk around our neighborhood, and she was like, you love this stuff. Like, you need to do more with this. Don't just go talk about it and do book talks. And she was again, one of these people who like gave me a nudge. And we partnered with her to help launch the original list. And so I'm so grateful to Desiree for just being like, you can do this. You could do this. What are we going to do? And not taking no for an answer when I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if anyone will care. And she's like, no, this is a necessary thing right now. So anyways, we launched this, the original Changemakers list 2 years ago. And then we had a summit at first in New York. And now we've been doing a series of dinners with the women in the community who had been named to the list. It's 50 women who are transforming business and philanthropy. Every year, it's a new list of 50 women. It's unranked. And it's a combination of people who you know about and people you've never heard of who are doing things to really drive change. There are other awesome power lists out there. And this is really a list about people who are doing things to drive change in their industry and beyond. And it's been so much fun. And we just launched this podcast. You can subscribe. It's called Changemakers and
I'm going to put in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes. And it's been so incredible. Our first episode was with Ariana Huffington, who is obsessed with sleep and how you are a more effective, efficient person if you sleep. And I always have her words echoing in my ears when I'm like, oh, I should go to bed now. But there's so much practical stuff in this. And the great thing about this format is I really get to ask these women about kind of their life hacks and how they're using AI and what are their secrets to juggling all the things and how do they really pull it all off and what their advice is. And so there's some great practical advice in the podcast, which I love so much. So yeah, it's been a huge amount of fun and really gratifying to get to bring these stories to a broader audience. Because I think a lot of these women are either not putting energy into talking to the press because they're busy running their businesses, or they're a little afraid that there is a target on their back because historically successful women have been torn down, and that's horrible. And so I think that this is an environment where I want to tell the positive stories and understand how these women have done the seemingly impossible. So I
love it.
Really
You're literally beaming. I think one of my favorite through lines in hearing your story from the time you were little to today is that it's, we often think it's like being successful is this like intrinsic thing that we have within ourselves. But I think what your story highlights is like, we do need to surround ourselves with people who support us and give us the encouragement to keep going. It costs nothing.
Keep going, and also to do the hard thing.
Do the hard thing. Yeah. I mean, it costs
do things
nothing.
That you've never done before. It costs nothing. And when I think about people like Andy Serwer at Fortune Magazine being like, yeah, go on TV. Of course you could do this. Or Desiree being like, we'll build this together. Let's talk this through.
Or Dawn.
Or Dawn Ostroff being like, you can have kids and keep doing your job. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for even saying that. But and especially working on this Changemakers thing now, the women who have been involved and building it. And it's just like, when I host these dinners with women in the community, I really think that women who are in senior positions in companies do not know each other in the way that their male counterparts would. And I just hosted a dinner in San Francisco, and there were women across industries, in tech, in consumer products, in sports. And these women oftentimes didn't know each other, but should know each other.
Yeah.
And just to see the connections and the enthusiasm, and I am beaming because it's so much fun. And again, back to like my parents teaching me how to ask questions. I'm so curious about how everyone has found their passion and then really made it work. And a lot of these women I love didn't really find the company they're doing or what they're doing right now until later in life. It's not like they dropped out of college to found a startup in their garage. It's like these are all journeys.
I love it so much. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know as a journalist, you don't often get grilled the way that you're being grilled today about all sorts of things, but I'm glad that the book opened you up, and being pregnant opened you up to talking more about your own story, because I think it is really inspiring and positive to hear that you can be successful and also need a nudge from other people to keep going.
Yeah. I would never have done any of these things without a nudge. And I had so many colleagues who told me, like, you got to write a book, right? Like, when are you going to write a book? My colleague, Andrew Ross Sorkin, who just had 1929 come out.
No big deal, Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Yeah, but he was like, you should write a book. And I was like, well, that's like a ridiculous thing to say. Like, well, what book? And, it took a while to find the thing. But I just think having other people who really push you, and just like, you never know how a walk with your neighbor during the pandemic, like my walk with Desiree, would turn my book, really push me to think about marketing my book differently. And then she was like, what are we going to do with this? It doesn't stop here. And so I think find those people who are going to push you a little bit outside your comfort zone.
I love it, Julia. Well, thank you so much. Shout out to Dawn, Desiree, I'm missing Andy. Shout out to all of you. Props. You don't even know what you did. And I can't wait for people to tune into the pod, check out the book. Everything's going to be in the show notes. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Team, I need your help. If you love it here, please like and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to the Substack for full access to this episode's show notes and join the discussion. And of course, follow me on Instagram at mutha, mutha.life, for a daily look at all things mother. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another Chat in the Closet. This podcast was produced by Mother Life, music by Ronan Landa. See you next time.